Right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ge Wang, and I'm going to talk about coding to make music and it's a story of artful design. And by way of introduction, well, I'm going to actually tell you what I do. I'm an associate professor here at Stanford University. And during, I think, gentler times when we're not all in a pandemic, I physically teach here. Actually, there's a memorial church in the front, but I teach in that building way in the back under those chimneys. And that is Stanford Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics, CCRMA, and that is pronounced Karma. That's me. Well, that would be me in my office, again, during gentler times. And what is it that I do? Well, I design things. I build things with code. I write a lot of it, but what I build with it include tools, toys, games, musical instruments, social experiences. And I do write a lot of code. I love doing it. I love hacking. I am a hacker. I guess I identify as one in many senses of the word. But it's really kind of my craft. It's the thing that I feel at home using. It's also the thing that I try to ever get better at doing. I design things like Chuck, which is a programming language for music. Yeah, you can find this at chuck.stanford.edu, which I'm going to give you a demo of. This is freely available. It's open source, and you can make a lot of fun, cool sounds and music with this, and you can also make instruments with this. And I work with the Stanford Laptop Orchestra. I'm going to tell you a bit about that as well. And I design apps, and I'll tell you a bit about Ocarina and some of the other apps I've helped to design. And I also run Karma's Virtual Reality Design Lab, which we're asking a number of questions about how we might design well in this new medium of virtual reality. And I'll get to that. So that's kind of a roadmap of what we're going to talk about. But let's go back to this word design. Like, what is it? For whatever it is, it seems to be all around us. And for me, it's really an act of alignment. It's putting something into the world that is potentially useful, but it's not just being useful. It's useful in a way that also is in alignment with how we would want the world to be, like a gentler, kinder version of the world that we would want to live in. So I think that's the two sides of design that is design for me. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a demo of Chuck, which is a programming language for music and for sound. And to do this, hopefully you can see this. So I have this short little program here. In fact, I'm going to rewrite this. What we had was a sine oscillator. We'll call it foo. And we'll use this symbol called the Chuck operator to connect it to the DAC, which is the output. And then I'm going to say 440 is going to be foo's frequency. And I'm going to actually make this not so loud. So I'm going to take 0.5 as the gain. That's kind of the volume. 1 is kind of nominal volume here. 440 is the frequency. We'll let time pass for 2 seconds. And I'm going to chuck this, so to speak, to the keyword now. And so what this does in Chuck is it actually lets time pass for exactly that amount while generating sound. So if I did this correctly, you should hear a sine wave at 440 hertz for half a second. Shashank, were you able to hear that?
I was.
Wonderful. Okay, so that means everyone else can hear it as well. And what we're going to do here then is, you know, even if you haven't written a line of Chuck code before, you can look at this and have a pretty good idea of what it's trying to do. So what we're going to do here is actually copy and paste this. I'm going to change the 220 hertz, 440, 880. This will be half a second, 1 second. And if we do that, and now I'm going to hit this add shred button at the top here again. Now we hear the sine wave, but at 3 different frequencies. And by having the frequency from 440 to 220, we've basically dropped it by 1 octave. And doubling the frequency from 440 to 880 raises it by an octave. And here, if we like, we can put it into a loop. In fact, an infinite loop. By the way, you do not have to indent, but you know what? It looks nicer that way in Chuck. And make this a little smaller. So if we do this, we now have automation, in which we actually have these basically the same sine wave going through these frequency changes with specifically these prescribed durations of time. And this is going to just keep going until, of course, I stop the program. And so in this way, you actually can see how we can incorporate programming control structures to help us make sound. Now I'm going to just leave one of these, but instead of a hard-coded number, I'm going to generate a random number between 30 and 1000, set that as the frequency. So every second, we hear a new frequency. Let's change that to half every 200 milliseconds. Every 100 milliseconds. Right, so now we have what some might call computer music, right? This is the sound that computers back in old mainframe computers where they're supposed to make this when they are making sound. Or like when they're thinking really hard, like compute a trajectory to Alpha Centauri. And you got that. Now we can keep going. It's 10 milliseconds. Every 1 millisecond. Keep in mind we still have a single sine wave. It's still the same sine wave generator that we started with, but now 1000 times a second we're randomizing its frequency. And what that gets us is, well, no longer sounds anything like a sine wave that we might think of, but instead it's this crunchy kind of a granular structure that we now hear. And it's interesting because we actually crossed a perceptual threshold here where around 20 to 30 times per second, we stopped perceiving individual bleeps and bloops, and we started perceiving this whole thing as a carpet of sound. And it's really around the same frame rate that we, our visual and auditory systems both have this transition where individual events become a continuum. It's, of course, how movies and television works. And for sound, it's one of the few places where auditory and our visual systems actually line up in that way. Now you can go in the other direction. We heard 10 milliseconds. We had a second. You can change this to like a minute, hour, day, week, and so this program literally will go for 1 week before it changes to a new random frequency. So next Sunday at this time is when there would be a new random frequency. And you can even keep going. You can even say, hey, 52 weeks is my notion of a year. And every 1,000 years, literally, if we keep this running for 1,000 years, 1,000 years later, that's when it would acquire a new random frequency. And the way, of course, to read Chuck code is to kind of pretend you are the program running itself, where if you kind of go into this loop, you go back to the top of the loop and you acquire a random frequency, then you basically wait while sound happens, but precisely for that amount of time, or at least as precisely as the computer is able to afford. So in a nutshell, that is Chuck. And everything else you're going to hear actually in the rest of this presentation is going to be actually done with Chuck. So now actually let's go back to the presentation. And once again, you can get Chuck at chuck.stanford.edu. It's freely available, it's open source, and so come and check it out and chuck it up, as we like to say. Now, one of the things that I designed actually using Chuck was actually Ocarina. I was the co-founder of Smule back in 2008, and in 2008 we released one of our first apps, which is Ocarina for the iPhone.
Battery high.
Now, the way this works, and let me see if I can just give you a demo of it. And actually, I need to, let me stop sharing for a moment. I'm going to turn on original sound. And then I'm going to go back and share screen. Give me one moment.
Battery time.
Okay, I hope you can hear that. And inside the app is a Chuck program that's running that's trying to make sense of the sound. And what it's actually trying to do is to detect the act of blowing into the microphone at the bottom of this phone. And so of course I'm blowing to the microphone and I'm controlling pitch with these different combinations of these buttons on the screen. And you can play little ditties with this. For example. And so this is this is what you can do with the Ocarina.
Battery time.
And in fact, there are other things you can do that's all meant to be part of this physical experience that's the Ocarina. So you saw breath controls the articulation, multi-touch controls the pitch, and vibrato is controlled by the tilt of the phone. So hopefully you can hear that over Zoom, is that when it's flat, there's no vibrato. When I started tilting it, it gets increasingly more and more vibrato. So that's Ocarina. So I'm going to turn on original sound so you can hear me a little bit more clearly. There we go. And by the way, if anyone has questions, please feel free to put them into chat. And Shashank, please also feel free to, since I can't read the chat quite as in real time, please feel free to do that if you see any questions that people may have.
Sure. So should I just say them as they come in or wait until you're pause?
Feel free to just, whenever you feel like, if there's a question that you feel like could wait, we can wait. But if there's a question you feel like, oh, this is a good place to ask it, I'll leave it to your judgment.
Okay, great.
Actually, I'll pause here to see if there are any questions on Ocarina, at least on this part of it. And as people maybe think of questions, I'll talk a bit more about the design. So as you can see, as you saw in the demo, the design of Ocarina is pretty simple. In fact, it was designed to be simple because this thing's not about what's on screen, even though it sort of is. But mostly it's about this designing a very physical experience using your smartphone. And you can see actually on screen, you see just the functional elements, the buttons. You see green waves that actually visualize your breath blowing into the microphone. But you do not see the ocarina or the shell or the casing of an ocarina on screen. And that's also very intentional. This is kind of a statement to say that, hey, guess what? Your phone isn't emulating an ocarina. When you're using this app, your phone becomes an ocarina, a physical thing. And this also goes with this idea that you're blowing into it, a physical act, and you're kind of moving very physically, and of course moving your fingers, all of which contribute to the sense that this is no longer a phone, or at least not only a phone, but also an ocarina. This is Ocarina in gameplay mode. So you can see all the buttons respond to your touch. It's meant to feel organic. The circles falling down the middle of my screen there, well, those are telling you how to play the next note. Now that's the game mode of Ocarina, and you can ask, is Ocarina an instrument? Is it a game? Is it a toy? What's the difference? Well, I don't know. I don't know what exactly it is. I think it has elements of all of those. I think it's like a toy in the sense that it's playful. It's pretty low stake. It's unexpected. It's something that your phone, isn't exactly supposed to do. It's a communication device for people to talk to one another. Of course, that's all these apps on it. But in this case, it's become something else. So in that sense, it is a toy, but it's like an instrument in the sense that it's something you can learn to get better at. there's a craft of playing this, not unlike the craft of just learning any instrument, like a flute. Now, the question may remain, can this thing be as expressive as, say, a flute or like a traditional non-digital ocarina? I've heard people get really good at this thing, so I don't know where the ceiling is at, but that's a good question. But you can see why the moment we start asking these questions, it could potentially be a musical instrument. And then there's a social dimension. And in Ocarina, you can listen to other people blow into their phones from around the world. In the same app, there's a globe visualization. And in this globe visualization, there's someone playing O Shenandoah from the East Coast. From Indonesia, the Legend of Zelda theme song. Who is that? Who are these people?
Professor Wang, there are a couple of questions. Would now be a good time to ask?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so Adam would like to know if it can say words.
Ocarina, no, this cannot. No words, just sound, just music, just notes. No speech is in Ocarina. Okay. It'd be interesting though if you can also say some things depending on how you blow into it.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Harsh would like to know when Ocarina was released.
This was released in 2008. This is an oldie as far as apps are concerned. It's one of the first apps. Actually, if you go to artful.design, and you go to, say, author, I've given kind of various talks, and also there are links to Ocarina here. Let me see if we can find here. Ocarina. There's actually quite a bit. Actually, let me go to a different web page. If you go to karma.stanford.edu/Ge/Ocarina, you can actually read a bit about the history, as well as there's a paper on designing the thing. You can actually see some of these older news articles and a number of videos. Here's me and some friends playing the beginning of Stairway to Heaven on guitar and 5 ocarinas arranged for guitar and 5 iPhones. So ccrma.stanford.edu/_ge/ocarina. And also artful.design is the one place where you can access really all of this stuff. So artful.design is probably the site to remember if you just remember one URL from this. Other questions?
Yeah, so Akash would like to know, does Ocarina have functionality for adding effects or producing sounds of other instruments?
It does not. It is just an ocarina. It is pure and simple. I mean, there certainly be quite interesting if you can think about, can this thing also sound like, I don't know, like a woodwind, a brass instrument, a saxophone, electric guitar. But sometimes in design, you really, as a designer, you get to figure out not only what you put in, but also what you leave out. In this case, as a designer, I really want this thing just to be an ocarina. And you can see kind of how by changing these elements, it kind of changes what you're designing. Another example here is in the globe, right? This is kind of an anonymous social network in the sense that it's a social network. You can listen to other people blow into their phones around the world, and you can, they have names, right? Like Akar Joe here, but that's all. It's effectively anonymous. All you know is where they're coming from. You can hear what they're doing, and a name they've chosen to give themselves. That's it. And in fact, if you love this, the heart of the top left here, it's a one-way street. It's not like Facebook where, you say like, and you get to see how many people liked your post. This is like, you like it, but they don't get to see how many people actually liked it. So it's intentional. I think about adding features like, well, what if people did see how many people liked it? Well, I would say that changes the dynamic, does it not? Because now knowing that people are not going to see this, the only reason you hit like is because you liked it. And that may be a small difference, but I argue that's actually an important difference because it changes how you feel about the tool and actually something, frankly, about how authentic the tool is. And in a way, sometimes it's about leaving things out. when you create something, when you hack something, that makes the thing actually better, more authentic, more human, more, more kind and gentle. Um, and this removes the whole, like, let me see, on the whole popularity contest dimension from this. And you hear there's really, it's an end in itself. You're just here listening to people blow into their phone. So it's not to say we shouldn't make the ocarina like, sound like other instruments. That could be interesting, but there's something about the kind of the focus and the intentionality of this. That's a great question. But other questions? Maybe one more before we move on, if there is one.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions, but I think we'll just do one more and then we can move on.
We can take them at the end. And also ask me anything. Come and ask me anything.
Yeah, definitely. So this one, there's multiple people who'd like to know, how did you use Chuck to interact with a phone?
Great question. So Chuck runs as kind of an engine here that does all the mapping, but we also had to build, in this case, and this is back in the day where after this, actually, the app was built a combination of Chuck, Objective-C, and C++. And so we had to write different modules. One of the modules was directly linked into the Chuck engine, which is written in C++, that connected, that were able to get the input data from, say, the iPhone, like multi-touch. The audio is already going through the audio stream and the accelerometer data. And that was actually getting sent in the special conduit we created just for the app, so we can actually have Objective-C, C++ talk to Chuck code. So there was a little bit of work involved. And so even though there's a Chuck program that's kind of at the heart of the sound and the interaction of this, there's a lot of work underneath to connect the Chuck engine into the rest of the app. It's a great question. And by the way, we'll keep going and then we'll come back in the AMA and we can riff on all of these. Great questions.
Great.
I think if there's something, I don't know, almost philosophical for me in the design of this, and maybe it is philosophical. And, this idea that here's an anonymous social network, and maybe that's not a bad thing if we can design it to be something that gets people to be more gentle by the way we've designed it. Anonymity, certainly, as we all know on the internet, can be a kind of destructive force, unkind force. But sometimes I think if you try to create the environment and design it in a way that authentically gives people both choice, but also helps them to see the beauty of like not being trolls and to just be, gentler versions of themselves. Sometimes people, lo and behold, will end up being gentler versions of themselves. And if there's another philosophy underlying Ocarina's design, it might be that technology should create calm. Mark Weiser, he was the CTO of Xerox PARC, not far away from Stanford campus. And he had this belief in that technology isn't just here to solve all our problems. Now that seems like what we most naturally might think of the role of technology. What's technology for? Well, it's here to solve problems. It's here to create wealth, and all of which might be true. But this is an aesthetic ideal. This is saying, yeah, whatever else it's doing, it could do it in a way that helps you feel something, that brings a kind of inner peace to you. In fact, this is a review left in iTunes store for Ocarina back in 2009 that says, "This is my peace on earth. I'm currently deployed in Iraq, and hell on earth is an everyday occurrence. The few nights I may have off, I'm deeply engaged in this app, the globe feature that lets you hear everybody else in the world playing is the most calming art I've ever been introduced to. It brings the entire world together without politics or war. It is the exact opposite of my life. Deployed U.S. soldier." Now, this is something that, as the designer of Ocarina, I did not expect, nor did our team. We wanted to build a playful toy and for people to, have a whimsical kind of a fun with. But here, this really seemed to mean something for this person. And maybe this is to say good design is useful, it solves problems. But maybe artful design, great design, is something that also, in addition to being useful, or in the way it's being useful, tries to understand something about us. Like your favorite song, a favorite movie, a favorite person. These are entities that, in a way, gets us. And can the tools we build actually get something about who we are? right? And that's kind of this idea of artful design. And this is why, like, it's not just about, whatever it is you're doing, whatever technology you're using, whatever language you're using, however you're putting everything together. When we are actually hacking, creating, designing, engineering, the technology, it has to do with the technology, but always has to do with things outside, beyond the technology. It has to do with context, historical, social, cultural, humanistic contexts. And I think that's what artful design is trying to do. It's saying to be a really good engineer, you not only got to be able to work with the technology, you got to understand how it fits into the world. And that is actually artful design. Some more examples in how we think about it at Karma might include the Stanford Laptop Orchestra, where we have an ensemble of laptops and people sitting on meditation mats with these special speakers we built out of IKEA salad bowls that keep sound local to the instrument. And here we're actually adopting a hybrid approach between using computers and a lot of code to make sound in music, but about how the sound is actually generated, produced. In this case, it keeps sound really local and proximal to the person and the instrument making the sound, and that's more like traditional acoustic instruments. It's hard to hear here because this is a recording. This is a piece called Twilight, and we're kind of going with this metaphor of like lifting the sound, pulling the sound out of the ground. Here's a totally different instrument. This is the laptop accordion. What is happening? Why is this person playing his laptop like an accordion? Well, the why is a really good reason, but let's talk about the how first. How does this work? Well, if you were thinking, is that using the front side camera and using optical flow, a computer vision algorithm to track how fast and slowly you're closing the lid, and while sound is generated on the computer, well, if that was your guess, you'd be right. That's exactly how this works. And the why is really interesting. It's really the same reason as why you would want to like an ocarina for your for your phone. Like why do you want, what problem does this solve if design is supposed to solve a problem? Well, it's a good question because you know what? Nobody asked for it. Nobody asked, be like, it's not like we did a poll, be like, hey, people, we're building an app and what should we build? People are like, you know what we really need? We need for our iPhones, we need to blow into our iPhones and make music with that. And we want to be able to see other people around the globe blow into their phones. No, it did not happen like that. Literally nobody asked for it. And just like nobody asks for a laptop accordion. Sometimes when you design, when you build things, you just do it because it might be interesting. And in a way, that's what I think, it's sometimes you got to go solve a problem as engineers. Other times, as engineers, it's actually about exploration. It's actually about playfulness. It's about what can we learn actually in building this thing, and also in just building things that might be interesting for as an end in itself. That's also artful design. I think this question really I want to ask you is, what does it mean for design to be really artful, right? I'm not talking about using technology or code to make art. It might include that. Clearly, I'm a fan of that. But I think artful design means, again, it's building things that show some understanding. In this case, both the ocarina and the laptop accordion might understand something about who we are as kind of playful beings. We like to play. We like to play music. We also like the physicality of things, right? Like the ocarina, the laptop accordion is a physical artifact that literally turns the laptop on its side, and you're interacting with it in a very physical context. And by the way, this is almost certainly bad for the hinge on your laptop, but so it goes. And then we do things like VR lab, right? And the questions we ask in the VR lab which is part of my music computing and design research group, include what does it mean to design artfully in the medium? What are VR's artistic, philosophical, and humanistic implications? What new musical interactions and instruments are possible? How might we play music together in a virtual space? Excuse me. How to design novel tools for expressive VR. I'll talk about Tunity in just a moment, which is Chuck and Unity. If the question is like, how do you get Chuck and the iPhone to go play together? Tunity directly answers the question, if I'm already using Unity to say build games and other software, can I get Chuck? Can I write Chuck code that works natively with the things I'm building in Unity with Tunity? The answer is yes. And I'll briefly get to that. How might we design immersive virtual environments that encourage play, stillness, and calm? So this is an instrument by Marina. She here has created a foot piano. She has sensors on her feet. If you've seen the movie Big, with Tom Hanks playing a larger-than-life piano, well, that was the inspiration. This is a two-person violin. Sorry, the sound's a little low. But Kyle, under the HMD, he's controlling the pitch, and I'm just moving the controller, which any movement that's detected translates to sound. And so all of this is actually built with Tunity, which is Chuck for Unity. It's a plugin you can download for Unity, and what that allows you to do is the timing that I showed you at the beginning of Chuck is now something you can have access to in Unity. So you can actually drive the timing of your Unity scenes with the strong, precise timing of Chuck, and have procedurally generated audio, algorithmically generated audio, or just sounds and in sound effects. That's all generated, controlled between Chuck and Unity. You can do a lot with it. For example, this is Kung Woo Kim's MIDI.city, all built using Tunity. This is a city that is kind of a musical city, built in Unity, built in with Tunity. And you can turn on the buildings. And everything is kind of algorithmically controlled. So you can turn the Ferris wheel that changes the tempo of the whole scene. And you can see everything is rigged for the audio and visuals to happen together. And when things really get going, we can go to the moon. On the moon, there are rabbits, because of course there are rabbits on the moon, and they are going to start making some rice cakes. And from this rice cake, actually, a chord train will emerge. And you can see the rabbits' movement, all of the movements here, from the buildings, from the cars, the planes, all of this is actually controlled from the Chuck side, so that the timing is completely precise while generating audio that is live, not a recording, and something that you can control. And this actually, just aesthetically, by the way, this creates a kind of a city that I'm like, wow, it's a beautiful place. I would not mind living in a city that makes me feel like this. And that is artful design, right? I mean, this is the idea of building things, whether it's a tool or a toy or a game, a programming language, a social experience. You know, at the end of the day, it's about what it means and how it makes you feel. Some UFO here are start making some music together. You know, UFOs come in peace, right? I mean, I think it's a lovely vision. So this is all to say, you know, design, coding, hacking, engineering, technology. As designers, it's actually all about choices. And what I want to end with is by talking about this question. It's actually the most fundamental question of them all. It's kind of the why. Why do you do what you do? Why did you do that? What did you do in the way you did it? And that actually is an ethical question. And it doesn't, you know, it's not about building technology that is neutral as possible. In fact, if you've been following the news and really thinking about it, you might come to realize that technology is never neutral, has never been neutral, and never will be neutral as long as humans actually design them or have a hand in designing them. Because you know what? Our ethics, our values make their way into the design for better and often for worse. So I think it's not about actually designing neutral technology. It's about being aware of what values are we actually expressing in the things we make. And, in the ethics of technology, what is it about? Is it about trying to do no evil? That conforms with a lot of the urgency of a lot of the challenges we're facing now. It's like, wow, all these technology might serve a purpose, but they're also kind of harming us. The corrosive effect of social media, the unknown consequences of using AI and everything from, I don't know, kitchens to weapons to warfare. But that might be a different question than this following, which is how do we do good? And I would say that's also an ethical question, right? Ethics isn't just about how do we do this without doing harm. Ethics is actually about what is it that you're actually trying to do? And is that a good thing? And what does good mean? And a different way to ask this question is one that's actually both ethical and aesthetic in its nature. It's like, how do we want to live with our technologies? How do we want to live with artificial intelligence? How do we want to live with robots? What kind of social network do we think would actually do us good and actually lends to our well-being rather than takes advantage or extracts value from us? These are all questions that I think as hackers, we have an obligation to ask. And you know what's also really interesting to ask? This is actually what makes engineering ultimately endlessly and fascinating. It's because I think we get to look at not just the consequences of what we build, but actually the motivations. Why do we do this? And in doing that, we actually understand a little bit more about ourselves, I think, when we choose to think in this more holistic way. And so like the Chinese character 人, right? Those of you who read Chinese will be like, that's the character for human, 人. Well, design is like that, in that, on the left is this leg that you might call pragmatics. That's the thing that's useful. But on the right is aesthetics. And if pragmatics is kind of how we live, that's the utility. Aesthetics says, hey, for what do we live? What makes life worth living and interesting? And when you can put these things together and whatever it is that you hack, whatever it is you design, then I think that maybe is better design. Maybe that is more artful design. And this is all to say, there has to be an artistic leap on the part of the designer, the engineer, the hacker that results from seeing and feeling the world at large. Designers are less problem solvers, more artists, philosophers, engineers, so useful things that understand us. Right? That's artful design. So tomorrow's engineer and tomorrow's hackers, tomorrow's designers, right, it has to be much more than a specialist, but a kind of technological artist, a moral ethical inventor, and a system designer that can try to understand the contexts of whatever it is that we build, however big, however small. When we put it out into the world, how is that going to interact and interface with the world? And who does it benefit and who might it harm? These are all questions that I think tomorrow, and really today's designer must grapple with. In higher education, we have a notion of like an I letter shaped student. It's like, is this the kind of person we want to educate? We'd be like, no, this is, in the sense that this is a narrow discipline-based education, that's actually not enough. Maybe we need to add breadth. So we'll get like a T shape, like the letter T. And here we'll get a little better. We have some depth and we have some breadth. In the book Artful Design, I talk about the pie-shaped student. On one leg, it's disciplinary expertise. On the other leg is domain expertise. For me, I studied computer science, so that's my discipline. But I'm applying my discipline to a domain, and for me, that's music. For someone else, it could be public health, which actually is quite top of mind these days for all of us. But there's a separation here, right? But it's also about how you merge and fuse these two expertises. So that means you got to be kind of an expert in more than your discipline. You got to understand how a domain actually operates. And more than that, and maybe this is the most important part, that's the bar on top. And that was what I call the aesthetic lens, the philosophical, artistic, moral lens that gives broader meaning and context in bridging these two legs, right? And I think that's what makes an artful designer. That's what makes a good engineer. And this is the kind of person we, should be trying to educate, in colleges, in high schools. Isn't this the kind of person we might ourselves want to strive to be? I'd say, well, if it makes sense to you, then yeah, this is a way to think about that. And you get to choose what kind of a designer you might want to be. And by the way, all of this I put into a comic book called Artful Design: Technology in Search of the Sublime. And it is a comic book. It's all 488 pages of it are done in this form that really looks at the design of a lot of things. Musical instruments to pencil bags, audiovisual design to instruments, to artificial intelligence, right? There's Rebecca Fabrink on the right urging us to not forget the human when we design AI systems, to games like Ocarina and Magic Piano, and how these things are more than entertainment, but forms of expression, but also modes of reflection. To social design, what does it mean to have a virtuous social network? What does that even mean? What virtues would it have, and what are the values we actually want to express in a social network? So one last example. This is in our app. Back in the day, it was called Glee Karaoke, and it's a social karaoke app where you can have the globe like an ocarina, but you can listen to other people and then add your voice in a +1 kind of way to what they're singing. In the wake of the 2011 earthquake and tsunami disaster in Japan, a woman reached out from Tokyo, singing a rendition of Lean on Me. In a matter of weeks, 4,000 people joined in. And this is what it sounds like. If we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. The only making us strong. So, at the end of the day, what we make will end up making us, right? We are what we make as much as we are what we eat. So that's the central tenet of artful design. And I encourage and heartily recommend all of you look more into this idea and look within yourself to ask, what does it mean? What kind of designer, engineer, hacker might I want to be if that is something I want to be? Right? And that in a nutshell is what I work on. And really more importantly, the why. Always ask why. And for me, it's to say we design to solve problems, yes, but ultimately maybe we design to help ourselves and others flourish, and whatever that might mean for them, and whatever that might mean to them. And that, in a nutshell, is artful design. And I also want to make a invitation. So right now, for those who are interested, I'm actually holding weekly Zoom series called Artful Design Television, Artful Design TV, in which we are actually every week. Yesterday, we actually just talked about the question, what do we really want from artificial intelligence, with special guest Rebecca Fabrink. And we're going to engage with the question of design and technology and society every week. So join us at artful.design/TV, but you can get to all of this from the URL that I showed you before. And in fact, if you go here, right, if you go to artful.design, that's this page, and you can learn all about this. There's a lot of content on the site. You can get the book if you want. It took me 3 years to write this 500-page comic book, and it was kind of a ride of my life in a way. And it's meant to be a playful thing. And then here's Artful Design TV here. And all of this, except for the book, which if you want, you would have to purchase that. Everything else is free. Artful Design TV, free to register, no experience needed. Register and tune in every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And there's an archive of episodes. And there's even a gaming and game design section where we play through games and think about their design and also just have fun. So that's kind of that's Artful Design. Um, and with this, maybe if anyone has any questions, and I also want to just thank Shashank and all of you for having me, and hope you're having a really great second day to your hackathon.